talk about 2 stories of time travel and a little bit of the Mandela effect.
Because apparently they tie in.
Because I think they tie in.
Do you think
I think the time traveling is affecting everything now, which is making the Mandela effect. Anyways, many authors and TV shows speak of time travel. My theory, though, to start this off, is that the reason we have the Mandela effect is due to someone going back in time, changing something. I don't think Trump was ever meant to win. A new Mandela effect, while we are on that subject, I have found is do you remember the raisins all having black sunglasses? The little raisin.
Yeah, of course I do. What?
Only one ever had sunglasses, and the other, and that one was always that it wasn't just black.
Why change that?
I don't know. The one that has sunglasses it's always colored frames, not black. Because you picture like the jazz singers and stuff with the black. Let's see. You can find residue on the net. I'll have to add some pictures. So today we are going to talk about people who say they have time traveled. I know it's weird though.
Yeah.
It's like a new one. It's like a brand new one.
The Seattle attorney who was sent by the U.S. government on multiple time travels, Andrew Basiago, claims that as a child he was recruited to participate in a secret U.S. government program for inventing a space-time hologram machine and teleportation technology. The program went under the code name of Project Pegasus and ran from 1968 to 1972. He is a lawyer specializing in the rather controversial subject of exopolitics, insists on having experienced 8 trips during his time with Pegasus, claims that his travels were executed through the means of a teleportation device, which was built following the instructions allegedly found in the New York apartment of Nikola Tesla. In April 2016, the guy launched an independent campaign for president because he knew for a fact that between 2016 and 2028 he would be either elected president or vice president of the United States. Not if you talk about being crazy.
There is a Project Pegasus though. The cat's trying to jump out the window and we're on the 2nd floor.
He literally jumped and almost landed outside the window. I had to pull him back in.
Before we start filming.
Because he's crazy.
He used to be an outside cat, but I refuse to live outside anymore. Especially in the city.
Yeah.
Alrighty. A wing commander enters a parallel dimension during a flight. In 1935, Victor Goddard. It's Goddard.
Goddard.
A commander from British Royal Air Force was flying to Edinburgh, and during the flight he passed over a airfield.
Decrepit.
Wow.
You were way off.
Decrepit airfield in Durham, Scotland. All that Goddard saw from above was a lonely farm and some cattle. A few days later, on his way back to England, he took the same route. However, his plane was caught in a storm, and with all the whirling and swinging going on, the pilot got so disoriented that he lost control of the machine for some minutes. Fortunately, the storm ended as unexpectedly as it started. He regained control and was hoping to be able to get the plane back on the right track by following some familiar landmarks on the ground. He looked down, expecting to see Durham Airfield as he sensed he was approaching it, but what he saw left him totally flabbergasted. The airfield was renovated. 4 brand new planes painted yellow sat on the runway, and some mechanics in blue overalls were attending to them. All of a sudden, the storm hit back again, and rainy clouds swamped Goddard's machine. The guy got lucky once again and managed to land safely at his home base. His friends back then were very skeptical about his incredible story, but 40 years later, convinced as he was about what he saw, Victor Goddard retold the story in detail in a book which was published under the title Flight Towards Reality.
Did you read?
I think that's the one though that later he came past it and they actually did like later it was that way or something. I know there's one like that. I don't know if it's that one though.
Soldier John Titter's time travel. U.S. soldier named John Titter from the year 2036. Sorry, itchy. He claimed he was supposed to carry out an important mission in 1975, the purpose of which was to save the world from future destruction. The scenario of the mission, as he described it, sounded pretty much like a sci-fi movie plot, and the predictions he made about the future raised a lot of eyebrows, and yet there was something about the description of the mechanics of his trip through the years that gave a sparkle of plausibility to his story. And what's more, his horrible predictions about the future might not have come true, but what if Soldier Titter had actually averted an imminent war by posting messages about it?
Exactly. I just did like these people predict things. Well, maybe it changes because they've changed it.
Ah. Maybe by saying something, somebody was like, wait. Maybe I shouldn't do that. Think about that. Benedictine.
A Benedictine monk invents the chronovisor
Chronovisor.
and witnesses a Christ's crucifixion. Father Pellegrino Ornati was a Roman Catholic Benedictine monk who claimed to have observed the Last Supper and later watched Christ dying on the cross. The device he was using was self-crafted chronovisor, i.e. a kind of a time machine that enables you to follow past events in real time. In 1987, Peter Kraza published a book about the monk's life and invention. The biography included also an appendix with an excerpt from an allegedly lost play by Quintus Ennius, which Father Arnetti insists to have attended during one of his time travels with the chronovisor.
Chronovisor.
I can't say that word. Chronovisor. Of course, Arnetti was pressured to produce some evidence in support of his claims, but when he produced a photo of Jesus on the cross supposedly taken through the device, everybody recognized a striking resemblance to a piece of art by Collat Villari. Arnetti then had no other choice but to admit the photo was fake. However, till the end of his life in 1994, he never took his words back about the existence of the chronovisor.
Jeez. The businessmen who took the highway to the 1940s. In 1988, Strange Magazine published a story which they claimed was based on a true event that took place on October 20th, 1969. Two business associates were traveling from a small town in Louisiana towards Lafayette, along the almost traffic-free Highway 167. At some point, they noticed a retro-looking turtleback type of car ahead of them, which had a license plate with the year 1940 on it. What they observed when they shortened the distance between the cars was that the woman behind the wheel was also dressed in 1940s-style clothing. Driving alongside the vintage car, they could see there was a small girl on the passenger seat next to her, and the woman had an expression of panic written over her face. They gestured at her to pull over so that they could help her. She nodded approvingly and began the maneuver. The two businessmen passed slowly by her, but when they halted on the side of the road and turned to look at the other vehicle, it was nowhere to be seen. The car with the scared woman and the child had simply vanished into thin air. The story has an even more mysterious twist ending. Some newspaper from the 1940s reported the bizarre disappearance of a mother and her kid. Ooh.
Here's another one that they've proven actually existed, but top secret. The only survivor of the Philadelphia experiment speaks up. You know, we've all heard about the Philadelphia experiment. In 1943, the U.S. Navy launched an experiment in Philadelphia aiming at making military ships invisible to the radars of the enemies. This was achieved by wrapping massive Tesla coils around a ship which functioned as electromagnetic generators, and then activated. They created an electromagnetic field that would stretch out and divert the radar waves from the ship, making it invisible to the receivers. What happened though was that not only did the ship disappear from radar, and also from the city of Philadelphia altogether. Al Bielek,
Where? Oh, I don't know.
Bielek,
She's gonna butcher it.
who was the only survivor of the experiment, claimed that the ship went into hyperspace and 2 men were sent 40 years ahead of time and then retrieved back to the battleship in question. He was later recruited to participate in the Montauk project, which had the purpose of developing various psychological warfare techniques, including time travel. Al, not B word that said it, that in the 1980s, he, together with another guy, traveled to Mars several times, a fact he remembered much later when his purposefully erased memories started to reappear. Al went public about his involvement in the two projects in 1989 and showed himself as a guest speaker on Radio Talk. Shows and conferences till his death in 2011.
Dun dun dun.
I don't know, I still think there's like glitches or something that happens.
Glitches in the Matrix.
Something happens.
Swedish man meets his 72-year-old self in the year 2042.
I'll show pictures. This is trippy.
I'll watch it. If you happen to meet this balding 30-something-year-old Swedish guy, he'll probably introduce himself like this. Hi, my name is... I'm probably going to butcher this, so bear with me. Håkan Nordqvist? Nordqvist? I don't know. And I have met myself in the future. Of course, most people would just turn their back at him, thinking he is some crackpot. But Håkan couldn't care less whether people believe him or not, because he has proof. A 167-second film of the encounter that he recorded on his phone. The story that goes with the video is the following. One day in August 2006, the guy was fixing the pipes in the kitchen sink, and as he crawled inside the cabinet, he found that it was connected to a tunnel. He went on crawling for some time until he saw a light at the other end of the tunnel. When he got out, Håkan realized he was in the future. The year was 2042, and he got to meet his future self, a 72-year-old solid guy with some extra pounds around the waist, and who had the exact same tattoo like his, only a bit faded. When he put to the test, the old man happened to know every single thing about Håkan, even the best-kept secrets from his childhood. Dun, dun, dun.
I don't know if you guys have read Stephen King's book. I'm not going to spoil it for this one. But he kind of gets in the future in a weird way, too.
I'm going to kick your ass.
I'm going to tell you how.
I don't want to know.
Two female academics saw Marie Antoinette live in 1901. On a hot day in August 1901, two Oxford professors and close friends on vacation in Paris, Anne Moberly and Eleanor Jourdain, decided to explore the the area around the Petit Trianon, a small château located on the grounds of the Palace of Versailles.
Chateau.
What's that say?
You said chateau.
It was exactly there that they experienced something that today we would call it a time slip. However, the two ladies got lost, and soon after they began observing things that were out of place and time. Later, Jourdain would write in her journal, everything suddenly looked unnatural, therefore unpleasant. Even the trees seemed to become flat and lifeless. The other woman recounted that after they crossed a bridge and reached the gardens in front of the palace, they came across a lady who was sitting on the grass sketching. She was dressed in an old-fashioned summer dress, and they thought she very much resembled Marie Antoinette, as seen in portraits. They also encountered a man they believed was the Comte de Vaudreuil. I don't know.
Oh, that's me. Words I don't understand.
Something in French.
Something. I don't know. This is called The Man from Torrid.
This is a pretty popular one.
In 1954, a man was trying to get through customs at Haneda Airport in Tokyo, Japan, had a bit of trouble with the customs agents. It was because he forgot to declare something on his customs form, but because he claimed to be from a country that didn't exist, and he had a passport and stamps to prove it. His passport was from a country named Torrid, which he claimed was in between Spain and France. When customs official pulled out a map and asked him if he meant Andorra, he became angry. He said that yes, the location was right, but Torrid had existed for at least 1,000 years. He had never heard of Andorra. He was given a hotel room for the night while the police tried to figure out what was happening. Even though there were armed guards posted outside his room, the man had vanished by the next morning. His passport, which had been stored in the security office at the airport, was also gone. Officials never figured out the mystery of the man from Torrid. Dun, dun, dun.
A lot of people have heard that one. Here. Okay, a woman became paralyzed after witnessing a ritual taking place in the 17th century. The Marcahuasi stone forest in Lima, Peru. The stones resemble very much human faces, and no geologist is 100% certain how exactly these stone structures were formed. Some people, however, believe they may be a door to another time and dimension. The story of a 30-year-old woman suffering a hemiplegia, a disorder resulting in a complete loss of motor function in half of the body can be proof of it. She was a patient of a renowned medical doctor and investigator of the paranormal in Peru, to whom she revealed that her condition could be somehow connected with a camping incident that had taken place in the vicinity of Marcahuasi. A couple of years before, she went exploring the area with some friends, and they eventually came across a small, meagerly lit stone cabin from the inside of which loud chanting was coming. Curious as she was, she stuck her head through the open door, but what she saw threw her in absolute bewilderment. The people who were chanting and dancing were dressed in 17th century fashion. She made a move to go inside the cabin, but her friends pulled her out when she had half entered it, apparently not quite on time because at that very moment half her body became paralyzed.
Ooh.
Don't go getting into caves you don't know about. No, I'm just kidding.
You're weird. But that's why I love you. The British tourist who stayed at a non-existent hotel in France. The year was 1979. Two British couples were driving through northern France on their way to Spain, looking for a place to spend the night. Eventually, they drove to a building that looked like a motel, only the men standing in front of it smoking hurried to inform them that it was an inn. As everything inside the inn seemed pretty old-fashioned, no phones and no other modern conveniences whatsoever, the tourists logically concluded that it had to be an attraction, a theme hotel of some sort that was supposed to make the guests feel as if they were in the 19th century. During breakfast next morning, they were attended by two men in caped uniforms with a solemn expression on their faces. After paying the ridiculously small bill of 19 francs, the couples left for Avignon. After 2 weeks in Spain, they decided to follow the same route on their journey back and to stay at the same motel, not only because it was so cheap, but also because they enjoyed the out-of-date atmosphere. Imagine their confusion when they found the exact spot, but the building wasn't there, and the photos they had taken during their stay at the hotel didn't develop. Dun, dun, dun. I just like doing that.
Ignore her. She's crazy.
I am a little crazy.
Journalists experienced the bombing of Hamburg 11 years earlier. In 1932, journalists Bernard Hutton and Joachim Bernet were given an assignment by a German newspaper to do a story about the Hamburg shipyards. They were diligently doing their job at the site when all of a sudden the sky darkened, bombs began exploding around them, and they were deafened by the anti-aircraft gunfire. First, they thought it was a drill, but then realized it was the real thing. The shipyards were under attack. The two men managed to get back to their car and speedily drove away to Hamburg. The minute they left the area, the sky cleared and it was again peaceful late afternoon. They knew nobody would believe their story, but they had the photos they had taken during the bombing as proof. To their greatest disappointment, however, when they developed the photos, they showed nothing out of the ordinary. 11 years later, Hutton was having breakfast in his London apartment when he read in the newspaper that the British Royal Air Force conducted Operation Gomara, during which they destroyed the Hamburg shipyards. The photos of the air raid had captured exactly the same event the two journalists
He just took a chair out of the trash can.
had experienced back in 1932. No, he took the chair out to get into the trash can. I don't know what he's getting.
Oh, I thought he took it out of the trash can. Weird.
We live in an apartment, so interesting things happen sometimes.
Okay. I'm just making sure where I'm going. A Switch watch.
Insane.
A Switch watch. A Switch watch. A Swiss watch discovered in ancient tomb sealed 400 years ago.
There's a picture, it's true. Yeah.
Oh.
It's creepy.
In 2008, archaeologists doing some excavation work on a site in southern China were blown away by the discovery that they made. They found a Swiss watch in a tomb in the Ming Dynasty grave that was sealed more than 400 years prior. When the watch dropped off the coffin, the archaeologists first thought it was a piece of rock, but then they cleaned it from the covering soil. They realized the mysterious artifact was in fact a watch in the shape of a ring with the inscription Swiss on the inner side.
It's like one of those ring watches, remember, from the 90s.
The hands of the watch had frozen at 10:06. To the archaeologists, this finding was potential evidence of time travel, as everything pointed at that. For starters, they were the first to open the tomb after so many decades, and second, at the time when it was sealed, there were no wristwatches and no country by the name of Switzerland, for that matter.
So how is it a Swiss watch? There's pictures though. It's like one of those stretchy ones that you put on your fingers.
I remember those. I wanted one so bad.
I had one. Okay. We gotta get couch, seriously.
Yes, we do.
Okay, a guy from 1996 gets lost in the streets of a 1950s London. How would you feel if you went out to buy a bagel, for example, and turning around the corner, you found yourself in a completely different year? See, in my past lives, I remember being in like the 1800s of London. With no bagel shop around and not even your own house being built yet. Of course you'd panic. This is what Philip C., a policeman from London, claimed to have happened to him, except for the bagel shop. One afternoon in 1996, he and his wife went shopping while she was browsing the shelves in a bookstore, he went to another store down the street. After walking a few yards, he noticed that everything from around him had suddenly changed. The people were dressed in 50s style clothing, and the cars looked like exponents in an exhibition room for retro vehicles. The surreal setting made the guy so confused that for a minute he thought he was having a stroke. He tried to find his way back to the bookstore where he left his wife, but there was a woman's clothing shop named Cripps on its place. The second he stepped into the clothing shop, everything changed back to normal, and it was 1996 again.
Oh my god. It's weirder and weirder. A Scottish woman witnessed a battle that took place in 685 AD. On January 2nd, 1950, 55-year-old Miss E.F. Smith was attending a party in the town of Brecon. I hope I said that right. After a few cocktails, she got into her car, should be driving, and left for the village of Letham, where she lived. The driving conditions were very poor. It was pitch dark, and on top of that, it had started to rain heavily. With the road becoming slippery, her car ended up in a ditch. So Miss Smith was left with no other choice but to abandon her car and walk the rest of the 8 miles to her home. The surreal experience began around 2 a.m. when she was still half a mile away from the village. According to her account, a group of people carrying flaming torches appeared in the distance. A bit later, you gonna sit up there? Ooh.
I'm trying something here.
Oh, thank God. Maybe my ass will stop hurting. A bit later, a second group emerged to her right. Then she observed figures much closer to her who seemed busy bending down and checking the bodies which were lying all over the field. They'd turn over a body, and if they were not satisfied with what they saw, they'd turn it back on its face and proceeded to the next one. At that point, Miss Smith's little dog started growling, and she hurried back home before it had started to bark at the mysterious figures with the torches. 20 years later, a member of the Society of Physical Research showed interest in the Scottish lady's case, and after some research, he revealed to her and to the scientific society that what she must have witnessed was the aftermath of the Battle of a word I don't even want to try. Nectensmere? Is that it? Butchered it, I'm sure, but you get it.
Scottish.
Yeah, which took place in the year 685 AD, and the people with the torches were soldiers walking around the field looking for their own dead.
That makes sense why they would bring them over and look at their faces, I guess.
Yeah.
Oh, baby.
Whatever you want, baby.
This one's kind of trippy. People do say that, and there's like actual plaques and stuff of these kids. The Green Children of Woolpit. In the 20th century, a young boy and girl were found alone in Woolpit, England. They didn't speak English or any other identifiable language for that matter. And their skin was green. That's right, green. They were taken by a local villager, and though the boy died soon after, the girl survived and eventually learned to speak English. Finally, she was able to tell someone where she came from. She said she had come from a twilight-covered place called St. Martin's Land, and that she and her brother were taking care of their father's sheep on one day. When they found a cave, they went into the cave, and after walking for what felt like a very long time, they emerged in Woolpit.
Shocking.
Dork.
Charlotte Warburton travels through time without even realizing it. In 1968, Charlotte Warburton entered a cafe she had never seen before. Nothing seemed amiss, but when she tried to go back a few years later, it had vanished. Charlotte later learned that there was in fact a cafe in that spot many years ago. It had been replaced by a supermarket long before Charlotte claims to have walked in and visited it. Okay, that's not that creepy, though. It would have been better if she had realized it at the time.
Alright, a police officer travels to the 1950s from 1996. In 1996, a police officer and his wife were shopping in Liverpool. His wife went into a bookshop while he took off for a CD shop down the street. As he walked away from the bookstore, he noticed that everything was suddenly quiet. Then a van that looked like it was from the 1950s honked and swerved around him. Somehow, he was standing in the middle of the street, and stranger than that, everyone around him was dressed in 50s style clothing. Boy, we need to stay away from like Liverpool and stuff. Confused, he tried to go back to the bookstore. Is that the same one as before? But he wasn't there in its place. It was a women's clothing shop. Yeah, that's the same one as before.
What you do?
I apparently messed up.
So, if I was to go back in time, like, when they had cameras, I would make sure to get a picture of myself doing something like, from
Like
the
that
future.
guy who like took a video.
Right, that's what I'm saying. I would make sure that I would be like doing like this or something so that people would know. I'd be like, dude, look for the picture because I did it.
Same tattoo. You can see the video.
Yeah.
That's why I was showing you.
Take a picture of my tattoo. You know. I want to go back in time though. Awesome to go back in time. Jofar Vorin claimed to be from Lexoria. That sounds like a tummy pill. Make you poop. In 1850, a man named Jofar Vorin. She's so picky. Is that better? was found in Frankfurt on the Oder, Germany, and questioned. He spoke very broken German, which made his claims even more difficult to understand. He said he was from Laxaria and spoke the language Laxarians and Abramian. He said he was in search of his long-lost brother, but he was shipwrecked on the way to his destination. Warren didn't recognize any of the maps or globes that were presented to him. He claimed that the world as he knew it had 5 sections: Sakria, Aflar, Aslar, Oslar, and Uplar. In the Yearbook of Facts in Science and Art, John Timms reported Bourne was taken to Berlin to be questioned and studied.
One of them that's not on here is this guy. He just showed up in the middle of the street and got hit by a car. And in his pocket he had coins from that were like mint condition coins from like 100 years before, and nobody could figure out who he was or anything. He had an ID and stuff that said his name, but nobody of that name was around. And then they were able to find other people, and that family had heard a story where their uncle or somebody had gotten lost after working with cattle or something, or was working or something, and they didn't see him after that. They thought he had just left and started a new family. But he literally just showed up in the middle of the street and got hit by a car.
Dude, what if that happened to my uncle?
Yeah.
He didn't disappear. He went through a time portal in the water or something.
Yeah.
Dude. I should look through historical photos and see if I recognize him.
That'd be trippy.
That would be trippy.
I'll probably try to post some pictures of the lady with the supposedly in the chaplain.
Chapel?
No.
Chapel?
The video where she looks like she's talking on the phone. David Chapman. I think that's the one. Anyway.
I don't know what you're talking about.
There's a few pictures and stuff of people that supposedly time traveled. Anyway, like and subscribe. What should we do next? What do you guys think of the time travel and Mandela effect?
For God's sake, comment, would you please? We'd like to hear from you.
Yes. Anyways, thank you for your views.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.